To have you with us. Right now, as we speak, families from the two Koreas who had been separated for over 6 decades because of the Korean War are finally meeting in a rare reunion event. I'll be looking at the significance of this with a guest in the studio later. But first, let's go straight over to our news centre where Devin Whiting has the latest on that for us. Devin?
Hi, Jang-ho. The reunions kicked off just an hour ago. This is the first time the two Koreas have held an event like this in 3 years. South Korea chose around 90 people by lottery out of tens of thousands of applicants. And those people, the ones who were healthy enough to go, are in the north right now, meeting their long-lost relatives. Oh Jung-hee is one of our reporters covering the event for us this week. She's near the inter-Korean border and joins us now. Jung-hee, it's going to be an emotional week for those people meeting relatives they thought they'd never see again. But let's start with what's happened so far and then the schedule for the rest of the day.
Devin, the families torn apart by the Korean War are meeting each other as we speak. Though we haven't received any footage from the reunions, it goes without saying that the sights and sounds will be highly emotional there. These are people who've been ripped apart from their sons, daughters, and siblings 70 years ago and are meeting each other for the first time. 89 South Korean participants are there at North Korea's Mount Kimgang Resort with 1 or 2 relatives of each. And basically, I'm less than 30 kilometers away from that place. What you see behind me is basically as close as you can get to North Korea in the south. And North Korea's Mount Kimgang would be far to the east from where I am. So the first reunion event, the group reunion, started at 3 p.m. Korea time an hour ago and will last until 5 p.m. All the South and North Korean families will have gathered in one room, sitting with their relatives and sharing memories of the past. This morning, I talked to a few of the participants and they couldn't hide their emotions. Some of them told me that they could hardly sleep thinking of meeting their relatives in the north, and others were already sad that this will be their last time they'll ever see each other. I could also see that they dressed up very smartly for this more than likely final get-together. There are actually more than 360 South Koreans in the north. They are the 89 participants, each with 1 or 2 relatives traveling with them. That's nearly 200. And the rest are support staff like medical professionals and members of the press. After the group reunion, there will be a welcoming dinner hosted by North Korea this evening, and the rest of the day will be full of joy and tears as these people are meeting each other for the first time after 70 years of complete separation and no contact, zero contact at all. Devin.
All right, Jung-hee, thank you very much for that. We'll be checking back with you later. Now, talks between the U.S. and North Korea on denuclearization appear to have stalled, but it looks like Secretary of State Mike Pompeo will be heading to Pyongyang again soon to try and get things moving. Lee Seung-jae reports.
In an interview with ABC News This Week on Sunday, John Bolton said the Trump administration expects U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo will travel to Pyongyang soon, making his 4th visit to the communist state. With the top U.S. diplomat unable to meet North Korean leader Kim Jong-un during his 3rd visit last month, Bolton says the administration expects Pompeo will hold direct talks with Kim this time around. The purpose of the visit, according to Bolton, will be to urge progress on negotiations to denuclearize North Korea, adding the U.S. expects it to happen within a year. Bolton also referred to the historic Singapore summit between President Trump and Kim in June, saying the process of denuclearization remains their highest priority. During a cabinet meeting led by President Trump last Thursday, Pompeo said he hopes there can be a big step in nuclear negotiations with North Korea before too long. Pompeo emphasized that during the many months of negotiations, the regime conducted no nuclear or missile tests, adding that Washington is engaging in dialogue with Pyongyang for a brighter future for North Koreans. Pompeo has continually been expressing his hope for a breakthrough. With Pompeo's visit expected in the near future, both South Korea and the U.S. hope the trip will breathe fresh life into the denuclearization process, which seems to have stalled in recent weeks. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, the North has agreed to allow some inspections next year to show that it's complying with its promise not to launch ballistic missiles without warning. These inspections will be from the point of view of international aviation, with officials to visit from the UN agency that governs air transport. Kim Hyunwook has this report.
North Korea has agreed to allow the Montreal-based International Civil Aviation Organization to conduct on-site safety inspections for international flights from the regime's missile launches. Citing an official at the organization, Japan's Kyodo News Agency reported Sunday that Pyongyang gave such an assurance in May when high-ranking officials from the UN agency visited the country. Accordingly, the ICAO plans to send personnel to the north sometime next year to verify whether the regime has taken appropriate measures to keep its pledge of refraining from launching ballistic missiles without prior notice. The 192-member organization has repeatedly condemned the North for unannounced missile launches as it poses a severe threat to planes flying in the region. Kyodo says such a move can be seen as an effort by the regime to improve ties with the international community while gaining trust over its pledge to halt such launches. The upcoming inspection, the second of its kind in a decade, is expected to include interviews with the North's aviation authorities with the aim of ensuring that the regime complies with international aviation regulations. Kim Hyunwook, Arirang News.
In other news, BMW Korea is initiating the biggest ever recall by a foreign carmaker here. It's facing lawsuits from consumers over dozens of fires that have occurred in its vehicles. As safety inspections continue, BMW will be sending over replacements for the engine part believed to have caused the fires. Choi Si-young has more.
BMW Korea announced on Monday that it will initiate a recall of around 106,000 vehicles with faulty engine parts. It is the largest recall ever by a foreign car maker in Korea. The faulty component called EGR, or exhaust gas recirculation, is what BMW has said is the cause of the recent series of engine fires. The German carmaker said the recall normally takes 1 to 2 years, but it is trying to shorten that period and finish the recall within this year by shipping the engine parts from its headquarters in Germany. However, some owners said that they received a notice from the automaker service center saying their recall is feasible next year. BMW said a parts shortage might have caused such a change in the recall schedule. Meanwhile, the automaker said that as well as the recall, it will continue its safety checks. According to the company, out of around 106,000 vehicles subject to recall, 98,000 vehicles have finished their safety examinations, with about 5,000 cars waiting in line for the checks. But some owners question whether the tests could actually guarantee car safety.
I went through the safety checks last week, but since then the smell of gasoline has been so strong.
At a press briefing held on Monday, the head of Seoul Metropolitan Police Agency said he's looking into documents BMW submitted to Transport and Environment Ministries to determine whether the company intentionally hid the engine defects. Choi Si-young, Arirang News.
I'm Devin Whiting, and those are your news headlines.
Now, imagine spending some 65 years separated from your brother, sister, son or daughter, or even husband and wife, not even knowing whether they were alive or dead. That is the reality that hundreds of thousands of Koreans have had to live with since the Korean War broke out all those decades ago. On Monday, a small handful of those still alive today got the opportunity to be reunited with their loved ones, as well as say one last goodbye as they'll be once again separated after this week. I'll be sitting down with our expert guest to look at the greater geopolitical aspect of all this, as well as the latest developments with North Korea. But first, our Park Gi-jun has this report on some of those lucky few who were chosen as they got ready for this momentous day.
South Korean participants meeting their families in North Korea from Monday afternoon gathered in South Korea's northeastern city of Sokcho on Sunday. Some excited, others calm, complex feelings that are hard to put into words. Out of the 89 participants, only a few are lucky enough to meet their immediate families. They're upbeat but emotional with questions popping into their minds.
I just found out that my son's alive. I'm wondering how and by whom he was raised. He's 71 now. I'm going to ask him, how did you live? Who raised you?
I want to ask them where our parents' graves are, and I want to know more about their families too.
At 101 years old, Baek Sung-gyu is the oldest participant for this round of reunions. He's meeting with his daughter-in-law and a granddaughter from the north. His 2 brothers and 1 sister, as well as his son, who were in the north, have all died. Baek says it's apparent this will be the last time he gets to see them. He's prepared presents to give to his relatives, ranging from clothes and shoes to utensils and toiletries.
Well, I'm just going to tell them that I wanted to buy a lot more things but didn't have enough money. You always want to buy and give things to your family. That's how I feel.
Kim Hyunwook will also head to the north for the family reunions. He says that ever since he found out he was selected, he could not sleep nor eat for weeks, thinking of finally meeting his younger sister.
When I first see her, I'm going to look at her hands to see how much hardship she's been through. I'll be crying a lot and telling her that we should see each other in heaven next time. How else can we meet? A part of me was glad I got this chance in my lifetime, but another part of me was scared about how I would have to part with her again. But I think I'm ready.
The Koreans who've been torn apart from each other for most of their lives will finally meet on Monday. The next 3 days to come will be full of joy and tears for these people who are finally meeting their loved ones for the first time in nearly 70 years. Park Hee-jun, Arirang News, Sokcho.
Now to talk about the reunions and other stories from this weekend, we have with us Professor Kim Hyunwook from the Korea National Diplomatic Academy. Thank you for coming in today, Professor.
Pleasure to be here.
Now, we heard some heartbreaking stories there about the situations regarding the families who were separated by the Korean War for so many decades. I can only imagine what they've been through for all these years. It's the first reunion in 3 years, and although there have been several others over the years, how much credit do you think the President Moon deserves for this, making this one happen? But at the same time, what does it say about the fact that North Korea allowed this to happen this time?
Yes, I think this is a very breakthrough that have been made between 2 Koreas, especially because it was the event that has been possible after the Panmunjom declaration, which has been made between 2 leaders of North and South Koreas. Maybe because there were some comments and opinions by North Korea that if there will be no return of the female employees at the North Korean restaurants who have escaped from North Korea to South Korea, there will be no family reunion. So that was some kinds of hurdle that we thought that North Korea argues, because North Korea thinks that the reason they escaped to South Korea is not because of their willingness, but it was just by the South Korean intelligence agencies plans. They went there with knowing nothing about where they're going to, so they should be returned to North Korea. That was North Korea government's argument. But anyhow, the family reunion has been possible. We see separated families coming together at Kumgang Mountain place. So I think the meaning, of course, is the meaning itself. Meeting itself is very meaningful, but the extra meaning, if I can find, is that North Korea is trying to keep the promises that it has made at the Panmunjom declaration between Kim Jong-un and Moon Jae-in, President Moon Jae-in.
This is obviously a huge deal for the families involved, but looking at the bigger overall picture, one can argue that it does not have the geopolitical consequences, particularly great, as it's the easiest demand that North Korea can give to South Korea, as it has little effects on negotiations towards denuclearization or international sanctions and so on. Do you think this is a fair criticism?
Yes, it's fair, negatively or positively. Maybe North Korea is not willingly give up its nuclear weapons, just focusing on all these kinds of subsidiary events and making the declaration of the end of Korean War happening, which is good for North Korea, but not doing denuclearization issues. Maybe that would be negative side that we can think of North Korean intentions. But even positively, I think North Korea is wary of giving up its nuclear weapons, focusing on some of these events like repatriations of American soldiers' remains and reunion of separate family issues, which it thinks would be some kinds of significant contribution that would make the United States concede to what North Korea wants to get from the United States. So I think in that sense, there is not much progress about the denuclearizing issues, which I don't think is a good posture for North Korea, because I don't think the U.S. would easily give up all these things like, declaration of the end of Korean War, lifting sanctions, all that kind of things, unless there are some significant measures by the states to denuclearize itself. So I think what North Korea has to do is not focusing on all these subsidiary issues, but get into the core issues, which is denuclearization itself.
And hopefully with those kind of steps, these kinds of events can happen more freely and more openly, so more of the tens of thousands of separated families can reunite more often, and they can have some sort of peace within their families at some point, hopefully. Moving on to some other issues, though, a piece of news that came in the weekend that will have very big geopolitical implications is the fact that there are reports now coming out that Chinese President Xi Jinping will visit Pyongyang in September for the celebrations of the 70th anniversary of the regime's establishment. Now, if it does happen, it'll be the first time in 13 years that a Chinese leader has visited North Korea. Does this news come as a bit of a surprise?
Maybe in the long term, maybe it's a surprise, but when you think of what has happened between two leaders of North Korea and China, which means that they had 3 summit meetings already, it's not a big surprise. But when you look at some big pictures, what has happened even since 2013, I mean, this is a very big event, because now the two countries' relationship is completely reverted back to a normal state. I mean, 2013, that there has been Xi Jinping inauguration and the third nuclear test 1 month before his inauguration, which, I think pissed off Xi Jinping a lot. And what was really important at that time was that U.S. stance. I mean, President Obama's the United States was really experiencing economically a difficult situation, and they focused on its country economic recovery thing. But so that did not really care much about how to deal with China. So at that time, Chinese posture towards North Korea was really hardline. I mean, whenever North Korea was focusing on nuclear test or missile test, all that kind of things, China always to try to tame North Korea at the time. So that was the time, maybe from 2013 until the end of the Obama period. But after Trump came in and Trump's policy towards China changed, very hardline. So I think now, the relationship, North Korea-China relationship is, coming back to a normal relationship.
What do you make of the timing of this visit? I mean, there are many events happening around it. For example, there's the Inter-Korean Summit, the third Moon-Kim Summit that has been announced that was supposed to happen sometime in September. There's also the Mike Pompeo, the US Secretary of State. His visit is also touted sometime soon as well. What message do you think this meeting with Xi Jinping and Kim Jong-un now sends?
Two leaders have their own interests, I think. Kim Jong-un definitely wants the backup from China to deal with the United States. Very important insurance if North Korea-US relationship and negotiation is broken down sometime. From the Chinese perspective, I think North Korea is a very important buffer state to think about its new and different strategy vis-a-vis the United States. Now China's relationship with the United States is kind of not going very well. I mean, there's a trade war issues. And at the same time, China seems to be, past from the, North Korea issues. China wants to be actively engaged in the Korean Peninsula issues, also deal with the trade war issues with the United States. So I think this time, right before Pompeo's visit to Pyongyang, and also before the Inter-Korea Summit meeting, Xi Jinping, by visiting North Korea, I think, tried to get some kinds of bargaining chip with the United States. So I think now there will be some secret deal and talk with between the United States and China about the trade issues and North Korea issues, all the kind of detailed issues like the denuclearization issues, declaration of the end of Korean War issues. I think all these, detailed agenda, I think two big powers, I think, would be talking right now.
So do you think there will be big movements, perhaps, in this situation with North Korea, especially with North Korea and the US, which has kind of stalled in negotiations? Do you think there will be progress now, finally?
We don't know. We don't know what will be the outcome of it. But I think, definitely Chinese visit to Pyongyang would make some adjustment about the North Korea's posture and the US posture. Maybe North Korea wants to use China as a backup to deal with the United States, but maybe not. China, have to think about the, harsh policy by the United States toward China. If China, try to, give some backup to North Korea only. So I think China would definitely, demand North Korea leader Kim Jong-un that, hey, you have to denuclearize yourself. So maybe there will be some adjustment of, give and takes by the US and North Korea when Pompeo visits to Pyongyang.
Now, just a couple more pieces of news that came out over the weekend before we go. The US National Security Advisor, John Bolton, confirmed that Pompeo will be going to Pyongyang soon. But perhaps more interestingly, he said that Kim Jong-un had agreed with President Moon Jae-in, the South Korean president, that his regime would denuclearize within a year as soon as Kim makes that strategic decision. That's quite a claim. How seriously should we take Bolton's words, especially considering how the Trump administration does have a tendency, shall I say, to exaggerate?
I think Bolton, he's a very good negotiator. He has a lot of experiences of negotiations. For example, with the Libya case, he made the Libya to evacuate its ICBM completely. So I think he knows how to deal with North Korea, but it's a very hardline person. So maybe he wants to focus on denuclearizing issues to, obtain the denuclearization of North Korea right away. Maybe this is a kind of a deal between North Korea and Bolton, in a sense that when you look at the current streams of Rodong newspaper of North Korea, North Korea begins to focus not only on the declaration of the end of Korean War, but now talk about more and more about the lifting sanctions, which means that maybe North Korea wants to give some more demands to the United States and make the United States to think about what the U.S. wants at this time when Pompeo visits to Pyongyang, kind of making the deal a little bit more complicated for the sake of the interest of North Korea. So I think vis-a-vis that kinds of demands by North Korea, maybe Bolton is thinking that there should be something more that North Korea has to give to the United States if North Korea wants to get the lifting sanctions from the United States. I think the 1 year timeline is coming out of this kind of context. I mean, Bolton is giving something to North Korea. If North Korea wants to get something from the United States extra,